All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast, and have we got an amazing show for you today. Special guest, number one, but we unpack the recent election result and what does that mean for the country, as well as give you a little insight into something that Ben and I are very excited about regarding our book. What else do we cover, Ben?
Well, Bryce, our special guest is all telling us and unpacking a buyer's agent story gone wrong. And in What's Making Property News, we're going to talk to landlords' insurance claims. Where are the top 10 suburbs in Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland and South Australia where those claims are coming through? So we'll learn a lot about how landlords and tenants interact in those markets.
Where the big claims are coming through, folks. You've got to stick around for that. Let's rip into the show.
Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And of course, welcome back to you, mate. How are you?
Well, mate, hasn't it been a massive 7 days since we last hit go on the pod?
Well, it has.
There's been lots of changes, lots of sporting moments. Oscar, who won, he's won 3 in a row in the F1.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk footy? I don't really want to talk footy. Can we move on from
footy? No, we're definitely talking footy. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Yeah.
What a game.
And then I think something happened on Saturday, didn't they?
There's an election. Yeah.
All right,
Australian people have voted.
All right. Let's talk about the most important out of those topics first, and that's clearly the Magpies lost. We were watching that, mate. So that me and the boys we were watching that, and there was a lot of screaming at the telly at the end. Can't believe your mate had a fairy tale opportunity, but mate, that was nice to see you guys have a little loss.
Oh, I still think what a wonderful game. Geelong, unbelievable. Didn't go away, persisted, determined to actually keep in the game, which they did. We had them early, but we didn't put them away, and so great result for them. And I just think 82,000 people, plus we were sitting at home also, had a group of mates around my joint. And so it was just a great game of footy. We just fell on the wrong side of the ledger when the siren rang.
Well, mate, I reflected on you on Saturday night after that game, because if I'm a Collingwood supporter, I'm disappointed. But every single one of them went up to the guy afterwards and said, "Well, that was just beautiful sportsmanship that they did to Jack Crisp on that night." But there's a comment that you said in the past that has been taunting me all weekend, and it's caused me to consider my days following Freo, Ben. It's caused me.
Wait a minute! Wait. This is big news! Breaking news!
I'm not sure that it is, because over the last 18 months to 2 years, I've taken sabbaticals, all that sort of stuff. But I've reflected on the fact that I have a desire for a growth mindset, Ben, and I'm always looking for opportunities to optimize my life. I'm looking for opportunities to optimize what I eat. I optimize how I exercise, what I put in my brain, who I surround myself with. I'm doing all this stuff, and yet there is something that I keep doing that is not optimizing my life. So this is what you said. You said to me, when I have a swing at you about what every non-Collingwood supporter does, they go, "Well, you've lost so many grand finals." That's what we always do, right? That's the only thing we got. And your comment to that was your typical stoic self, but it still annoys the buggery out of me. You go, here's the deal being a Collingwood supporter, Bryce. I go to the footy most weeks, or I go to the television following the footy most weeks, and I'm usually happy more weeks than I'm not, right? And so it's haunted me, because I after that diabolical performance that Freo put in on Friday, which is like
Thursday night, wasn't it? Thursday night,
Friday night. And here's the deal, Ben. If you actually go back through the history of that football club having a Friday night time slot, they put the bed so many times it's ridiculous. But that was deplorable, right? And I was grumpy and putting putting the kids to bed at half time. I'm annoyed, and they're getting the worst side of me. But that happens routinely, right? And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm actually the antithesis of Ben. Most weeks I go to the footy, or most weeks I turn on the footy. I'm not happy. And so therefore I'm questioning my whole philosophy around I optimize in all these other places, and yet in that one spot, I am frustratingly still annoyed. So then I go 24 hours later and I watch my kids' football team that they passionate about beat you guys, and thinking about you guys even losing, I'd still have been a happy Collingwood supporter losing, which was incredible. Okay. So there you go. I'm contemplating life decisions around optimizing for happiness, Ben, and that is not an optimizing strategy that I've got right now.
One day in your life, hopefully, Bryce, not too far away, one day they will have the ultimate success. And when they do, all of that joy, that emotion will just explode out.
Do you know I'm turning 50 this year, Ben? There's not that much time left. I've only got 50 years to go, and I'm not sure that there's a long enough runway. Because here's the theory. I've thought about it on the weekend. There's only been 4 premiership coaches out of the West, Ben.
Yeah.
And 3 out of 4 premiership, Mick Malthouse, Adam Simpson, John Worsfold, and Ross Lyon, getting them to the big dance is what I mean.
Yes.
4
big
coaches
dance.
that have got West Australian teams to the big dance, and 3 out of 4 of them are Victorian. So I'm firmly of the belief that Fremantle loses the head game all the time. They're a big fish in a small pond, and they have swagger over there, and they're treated like princes, and then they come over where you actually need to perform, and they don't have the mindset. Unless a Victorian comes over and says, this is the mind. Mick Malthouse did it. Ross Lyon did it. Adam Simpson did it. They just know, hang on, boys, I know you're walking down Hay Street in the middle of Perth, with some swagger, but you got to win it over on the East Coast. And if you don't adopt the right mindset and hunt. Anyway, I know on a property podcast I've gone on a tangent here, but
it's good. It's cathartic, Bryce.
Essentially my mindset minute today, Ben. It's like you win it, you got to have a check up from the neck up. And I know these...
it's cathartic.
It's a mental game. So
yeah, it is. Yeah. But I hope you can hang tough, because sometimes in life, when things don't go your way, you still got to hang tough.
Says the Collingwood supporter who, that's even more irritating.
All right, now the other big event of the weekend was obviously the election. Congratulations to the Labor Party. They clearly ran a better campaign and obviously won the results at the end of the day. So congratulations to them. It was obviously a big win in terms of increasing the majority. At the time of recording, there's a couple of interesting ones there. We might see one of the teal seats in Goldstein or Goldstein, depending on how you want to say it. I think Tim Wilson probably win that seat. Kooyong is still in doubt, and obviously, again, the seat of Melbourne. So it might be a little while before we know the results for those particular seats. But the Greens had a shocker. Let's be honest. Obviously, when Labor and the Greens...
For those listening, they can't see the little smile on your face there when you said that.
Well, I just think it's really important. At the end of the day, the Greens held back policy to support the people that they so-called wanted to support. It's a classic case of what they did years ago when they had a carbon tax and then they got greedy and they wanted more out of that and basically lost the whole carbon tax story. And from that, off the back of that, Australia has lost about 10 to 15 years of renewable investment into that marketplace because we didn't see that investment when Abbott came back into power. So, and they did the same thing in housing. Now, they will claim because they played hardball, they got more money. But, up until the 3 years, how many properties have been built under Labor's policy? Zero. Zero. They've found other houses and dwellings that they've now incorporated in where they've got about 46. But that's because the whole thing was held up by the Greens. So, people saw through that and they basically saw the reality is that their policies are dangerous policies. And ultimately, it wasn't going to deliver the outcome that they were the misinformation and the propaganda that they were putting out there.
Mate, I couldn't help but notice a couple of texts from you. One that you included regarding the Greens, shocking result for the Greens and Max Chandler-Mather. I noticed in the thread he didn't get back to you, so I'm sure you're still...
No, the firebrand it is, Max Chandler-Mather.
Because he was pretty keen to engage with you prior. But this one here, Ben, I like this one. You've gone, congrats Australian Labor for your win yesterday. Albo MP, you speak of being a man of your word, so I very much look forward to you and the Labor Party honouring your words in your victory speech last night. Australian values, fairness, aspiration, and opportunity for all. I too share these values, fairness and opportunity off the back of hard work and aspirations for self-determination and self-funded financial security. Ben, you've put it out there to say you've won, now be a man of your word.
Yeah, I mean, and Albo talked about being, a trustworthy and a man of his word. So if that is true, I love the fact that he's talking about aspiration and self-determination, because that's exactly what we want. Now, he also talks about making sure no one's left behind, and obviously equality. The question is, and that's where the nuance lives in the centre, and that's why I'm a centrist in terms of my policies. I think absolutely we need to make sure that we're caring for the most vulnerable in our community, but I'm also, you do not want to, at any point in time, basically, crush innovation, aspiration, anything, because that, at the end of the day, that grows the economic pie. And there's one thing that matters in this economy, and that is growing the pie. If you don't grow the pie and you still provide those services, you do that through debt, and that debt is ultimately going to catch up with us in terms of a debt spiral risk. So, I'm really clear on that.
Mate, you also called Scott Morrison to be Prime Minister on your Twitter many moons ago when it seemed unrealistic, and that happened. But this one you just retweeted on the weekend as well. Please, this just for context, 21st of May, 3 years ago, Ben. So almost to the day, you said this: please don't let Peter Dutton lead the Libs. Elections are won in the Senate. The Teal vote are giving you that clue and how out of touch the Libs are in Victoria, mate. So that's proven to be part of the challenge over the weekend in the wash-up, that what you tweeted 3 years ago came to fruition.
Yeah, and I think if the Liberals are thinking that they can put a male, stale, pale man in power again, they're completely tone deaf. So they need to find a younger male or female to lead the party and reconnect with urban Australia, because that's where the action is and that's where the votes are. So I think that, because we know the Nats are doing a great job in looking after, the regional voter. So it's just crazy if they want to go back to their core values of lower taxes, smaller government, and the economic leadership that they usually have. That's what they need to do. And I will continue to vote either side of politics based on who has the best economic plan.
I like it. And Ben, just in case everyone thinks this is now the psychology couch for Freo supporters or the politics couch, it's not. We've got a wonderful guest today who's going to come and talk on spruiking and what it actually looks like behind the scenes for someone who has experienced some of the tactics that we talked about in Spruiker 2.0. So hang around for that. We'll be there shortly. But some exciting news for us this week, Ben.
Huge news. We got our hands on a piece of our life work that we are super excited about. Can you give us a little look, Ben? There it is.
There it is. Thank you, Paul Roos. So our book has hit our desk, and we are super excited about that. So if you want to get your hands on this, folks, this still is not available to the general public. That'll happen later this month. So if you want to go onto our wait list, you go onto thepropertycouch.com.au / I should have checked this, Ben, but I think it's book-waitlist. If it's not, it'll be on the screen. But if you want to be the first to know, we will let you know how to get your hands on that before everyone else. But Ben, to say we're excited would be an understatement, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Bryce, you've done a great job in leading the charge and curating and doing pretty much, all the heavy lifting in the coordinating and let's all face it, a lot of the great writing is in there as yours. So in terms of that, mate, can credit to you as well.
No. Let's be clear.
No.
Let's be clear. It's our life work. It's our frameworks. We spend all the time up the ground, and then obviously I got a passion for the writing, so I did that part of it. But no.
Yeah, beautiful work.
It's definitely you and me, 50-50, 100%. So come and get your hands on that, folks. We'd love you to be the first to have it in your hands. So thepropertycouch.com.au / book-waitlist. And finally, Ben, before we get on. We've got one more other piece of housekeeping as well. I'll throw it shortly. But I've got a passion project, Ben. You've been very generous to indulge my passion project in two ways. One, let me talk about it endlessly on this podcast, and also to join me on this passion project. But in about 3 weeks, you, me, and the Sticks will be heading over to Indonesia to get a bunch of money that we've raised. We raised about $55,000 separately from a group of people that are coming over, and then we're trying to help 100 more people, Ben, from our podcast community. So we're 40% of the way there. We're trying to get $10,000, which is about 100 people getting their eyesight back.
Incredible.
No, that's actually not true. It's 1,000. 10,000 people is. I've got my maths wrong on the run here. But anyway, we're trying to get the 10,000 to help as many eyes as we can.
Yeah.
So that's at $4,184.93, Ben. So 40% of the way there. So here's my plea for anyone who wants to help us. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/donation, you can leave however much you can afford, Ben, is my request to you. But I've told my family, I've told my friends, I'm donating my birthday. This is it. I'm all in on it, Ben. So I've sent all of my family and friends to this spot as well. So if you could be a part of that, I would be eternally grateful. Ben, tell us about the MyKnowledge launch.
Yeah, I mentioned it a couple of weeks back that we were launching MyKnowledge inside more. Now, it's a curation of all of our downloadables, our video series on feature topics. Also, now it's the login area to go into any courses that you may have purchased from us as well. It's got all of our playlists for the Property Couch. There's calculators. There's all types of spreadsheets, infographics, all the stuff that we've encouraged people through the Property Couch, and I curated into one home. And here it is. It's called MyKnowledge. And you can see here we've got the core content areas. We've got masterclasses. We've got, readables. We've got downloadables, pro content, which is the stuff I was telling you before about, the purchased courses that we've got there. We've got the books, including obviously being able to access our new book in a couple of weeks' time. We've got our how-tos, which is really how we're breaking down key components in terms of different types of ways to get the most out of your more platform as well. There's tutorials in there in terms of that. There's the money smarts. There's the wealth clock. There's, money fit, wealth speed, those types of things that are all inside there as well in terms of the application. So everything in one home. In fact, Bryce, I did some rough math. And you think about all of our podcasts, all of the webinars we've done, everything that's available in there, around 99.95% of it is free. Is free content. And you don't have to run around trying to find it now. It's all in one simple home. So you create your More account, you log in, and you get access to that information. So if you go to the propertycouch.com.au/knowledge, MyKnowledge. Whoops, my eyes just didn't quite catch that.
Did you see Ivis have a conniption then?
Yeah, she had a little heart attack then. So yes, go and have a look at that, and that will guide you in. And of course, as to celebrate, we have a discount on some of our paid material in there as well. Yeah. So if you've got 50% off. So if you want to also buy any of our materials inside there, you have until the 31st of May. You have until the end of this month, and you just need to use the promo code ACT50. ACT50. ACT50, and you'll get 50% off as part of celebrating our new MyKnowledge, effectively educational content in there. Bryce, I also did some other rough math. The curation of our team and the knowledge you and I have of almost 30 years or thereabouts each, plus the knowledge we get from the team. We've got over 100 years of combined professional knowledge. We get to curate from all of those people, and we'll put it all in here. In fact, if I actually did the true numbers, it would probably push towards almost 150 to 200 years, given the size of our team, in terms of the knowledge that we curate and bring to life through all of our educational content. So what are you waiting for? It's free to access. 99.95% of it is free, and it will remain that way because we're passionate about educating our community in terms of how you can build a passive income for life as much as $3,000 a week.
Hey, Ben, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act 50 on it. Hey, did you see what I did there?
Oh, I love it. I love what you did. Yeah, it was good.
Hey, which is good. Hey, listen, to your point, Ben, if anyone's listening to this podcast, to the free point, if you want to do it yourself, we give out enough information across our back catalogue of everything for you to do it yourself. Where our business fits in is for the people who want it done for them, right? Because it's one thing to say, here's the what, it's the other thing to do the how. And some people want someone else to do the how for them, and other people want to do the how themselves. But to your point, in that platform, everything you need to get it done, and you can get it done for free, or at the very most, Ben, $29.95 for a book, which is pretty cheap to get that done. All right, well, that's an exciting launch, folks. We want you to check that out. And clearly, there's been a fair bit at the top of the show that we needed to get done. But before we move into our chat with Jayson today, my Mindset Minute theme, Ben, is around the cost of overthinking, right? So there's the paralysis paradox, which is the more options you can see, the harder it becomes to choose any of them, particularly for those with particularly analytical minds. So the ability to spot problems makes you really excellent at planning, but terrible at starting, because you know too much to be naively confident, but you're not enough to be truly certain, right? So that's where that paradox is. So this is what, and this is interesting, right? This is why less intelligent people often achieve more, because they simply start. Now, please, I'm not trying to be offensive or anything, Ben, but the more that you place in your intellectual capacity, quite often the less you're able to actually get out of the starter's blocks to do something. So here's the ultimate truth. Analysis and action are different phases that should never overlap, right? So overthinking isn't your enemy. Poor timing of that thought is. So you don't need to change who you are. This is the good news for all those folks who are overthinkers, and I'm a reformed overthinker. Just you need to know when to deploy your strength. So if your overthinking mind is a superpower, it is when you use it at the right moment. So here's the counteractive solution for everyone who has the overthinking, right? Don't try and stop overthinking, because that's part of your intellectual gift, right? Instead, contain it in containers. So there's some designated time over here to think about. And if you put in the context of building wealth, Ben, you accumulate, get some knowledge, but you work out what you got. There's the container. But then once you've done that thinking, you move over to this act container, and you go, right, I've done all the work over here. Now it's act, and without looking over your shoulder, without that revision, right? So that's really the counterintuitive solution. I got that from a guy by the name of Matt Gray, and I really, really like that. And I really like
that a lot. I can see a lot of people, that's part of the procrastination problem, which is the biggest problem in terms of people overcoming. So you build the confidence, look at the numbers where you need to, build that knowledge base. But to your point, it's like, but I can always have more knowledge, and I can always have more knowledge. But these, investment markets are complex markets. They're complex systems. And to that point, that's why most economists also, that's why they call it the dismal science, because they're so complex, and the more they think about them, the more they overthink in terms of their predictions or their lack of action themselves in terms of taking action.
Think about our book too, Ben. We just put another piece of content into that book that we haven't shared anywhere before. We've done that on purpose, so it's in the book first. But that's after you and me 30 years in the game. It's like, oh, here's a new piece of insight that we talk around in terms of investment lens, and we also put a piece in there around margin of safety, which we haven't talked a lot around as well. So if we had gone 30 years ago, we don't know enough, or we've got to keep learning, or whatever. It's like we developed enough to give us confidence to act, and then we act, and then once we act in the process of growing into it, we learnt more. We
well said.
There we go, folks. Hey, let's cut to an interview you and I had, Ben, with a guy by the name of Jayson Vella. He's a guy that reached out to me on LinkedIn. You'll hear that through the chat that we have with Jayson. But it was a really cool chat. We feel like it's going to do a really great service to our community to heed the lessons that you and I spoke to him about. So let's cut to the interview you and I recently had with Jayson Vella. All right, Ben, today we've got a very special guest. We are joined by Jayson, who's a long-time listener of the show and a committed property investor who, alongside his wife, has built a portfolio of 4 properties since starting his journey back in 2019. After trusting a so-called top-tier buyer's agency and experiencing firsthand some of the tactics that we warn about on this show, Ben, he's kindly agreed to share his story to help others tread more carefully. We're really grateful to have him with us today. Welcome to the Property Couch, Jayson.
Thanks, Bryce. Thanks for the introduction. Hi, Ben.
G'day, mate.
Mate, we're excited to chat with you. But Jayson, when you first decided to get help from a buyer's agent, what was the deeper need that you were hoping that they would meet for your portfolio building?
Well, my wife and I had already acquired several properties in Victoria, in the state where we live, and we were looking to broaden our horizons and become borderless investors and try and get a bit more direction of where our portfolio is currently standing and where we want it to be, and also help us locate those areas that we should be avoiding or be investing in. Yeah,
it makes sense. So we're going to delve into that a little bit further shortly, but we want to get to know you, Jayson, before we do. And to be able to do that, we like to head back all the way to the beginning and just see what some money conversations were like for you growing up. Did you have them? And what did you learn about money growing up?
Yeah, money wasn't. It was not really talked about directly. It was my dad's an immigrant from Malta and came over here and started his own cleaning business. So I think we were just exposed to it through everything in life, like from mum doing grocery shopping, scouring the catalogs for the best specials, and doing the admin work for Dad's business. He'd come home and have his little exercise book and write down what jobs he'd done for the day and how much each job owed him, and Mum would translate that to QuickBooks and print off the invoices and get me to go up and help her fold the invoices and lick the stamps and ask her the questions of what's this mean, what's GST when that finally came in, and then we'd mail them out, and weeks later the checks started rolling back in.
Did you have to go and bank them?
No, I used to accompany Mum to the bank. She'd fill out the ledger, the check, not the checkbook, the deposit book, and go off to the bank with all the checks and deposit them straight into the account.
Yeah, Jayson, any brothers and sisters that were involved in the process as well?
I've got 2 brothers. I'm in the middle. There's a bit of a gap between us. My older brother's 4 years older, and the younger one is 7 years younger.
Okay.
I don't really think that they showed as much of an interest in that side of things. I was sort of, Mum's always asking me to come and help her do that sort of admin stuff with her. Yeah.
And where's the origin story for that for you? I mean, because obviously we know that you've now got an active interest in taking beautiful action and building out a property portfolio. So congratulations on that. But do you think that that's the origin story for you in terms of seeing how a business runs and doing the bookkeeping associated with that got you interested in business and potentially wealth creation?
No, I don't think it was that. That was just a byproduct of living in the household, and I didn't really pick it up until I saw my own parents investing in property themselves.
Yeah.
I remember from a young age that my parents had a block of units out in the west of Victoria, out in Melton. They owned that with my grandparents, and when I was still young, so I didn't really understand the concept, but they were selling those up to the Department of Housing and then pivoting to move into their own investment for themselves. That was some years later. I started to grasp the actual meaning behind it and the wealth creation side of it. Like Mum and Dad purchased a house around the corner from them in Doncaster East quite a few years ago now, and at a mortgagee's auction, and Dad put some sweat equity into it and made that into a nice investment property for themselves.
So your lessons were visual, not through words?
Pretty much, yeah. I've always been the visuals type of learner, just pick it up a lot better than just reading pieces of paper.
Yeah, gotcha.
And is your path similar to what your older and younger brother have also done? Are they taking a same sort of level of interest in financial security as you are?
I wouldn't say so, no. My older brother has his principal place of residence where he lives, and my younger brother rents. As far as investing, I'm not too sure what sort of journey they're on in that regard.
And you folks, obviously, did they get it? Do they understand where you're at right now with your portfolio? And, do you talk about it openly around the dinner table now that you're in that position?
Definitely seek advice from them and what they sort of did. I've taken a more modernized approach to holding debt. The debts that you guys talk about: productive debt, tolerable debt, and bad debt. They had the very old school approach of buy a house, pay it down; buy the investment property, pay it down. They did a really good job, and now they're reaping the rewards of it. But
Right.
they're definitely very open with it. Like I'm an open book. I don't hide anything. If I wanted to, really.
Reaping, you see the parents are reaping the rewards. What does that look like for them? They're now able to self-sustain from their properties?
Yeah. Well, they have they've sold their principal place of residence, where we grew up, and they've moved out closer to us out in the west, in Sunbury, to be close to the grandkids. But it's very favourable for them. They've got their house unencumbered, paid off, and they've got another investment property here in Sunbury paid off. So their dad doesn't have to work, but he's very old school, loves to
Once a worker, always a worker.
Yeah, very much.
Well,
Yeah.
it's probably a good thing because it keeps the mind and body active, which is always a good thing for your health.
Mhm.
Hey, I know this episode will come out in May, and it's got a very summer series feel to it, Jayson. But it's not a summer series episode. The reason that we're chatting today is because you reached out to me on LinkedIn and you shared a story and thought that based on some of the content that Ben and I had been putting out of late, that it was worthwhile that you shared that story. So can you fill our community in on why you reached out and what was the backstory of why you reached out?
Yeah, after your recent episode on Spruker 2.0, I just felt like a lot of the comments that you made, Bryce, resonated with the story that we'd experienced with a top tier buyer's agent that we engaged and ultimately got out of because we didn't feel like they aligned with having our best interests at heart.
Jayson, can I ask a couple of broader questions for you? So, when did you start your portfolio? How have you thought about building your portfolio? I think that's an important journey because was this the first time that you actually used a buyer's agent?
Yes. We'd thought about engaging buyer's agents in the past, and the buyers. We actually even had a few initial consults with a couple of companies, and we just felt that we had wanted to push a more aggressive approach in our portfolio than what they offered. So we didn't end up going with them. And having a trade background with regards to the actual physical property itself, no financial background, but and seeing what my parents had done in the past, thought I could just go it on my own. So I did.
So you've got the knowledge from obviously the podcast of ours, and
Yes.
Where else did you seek to build out your frameworks and your ideas around how to invest in property?
Well, like I touched on earlier, and you touched on the podcast mainly. There's a couple of podcasts I listen to. I'm a very audible learner and a visual learner, as we touched on. So I like to just flick on the podcast and have it sitting out in the background. And just like I said, watching my parents and their journey.
Can you define aggressive for us, Jayson, just in terms of, because, Ben and I would consider ourselves to be conservative, get rich slow. How would you define aggressive as a reference to sort of our conservative, get rich slow approach?
More chasing higher yielding properties such as commercial and things with a bit more risk in them.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's mainly what I mean by the aggressive approach. Different types of lending too, with regards to SMSF and that sort of stuff. But I haven't gone down that path yet.
I find that fascinating because I think there's a real correlation here, Ben, that for someone like Jayson who's grown up licking stamps, sending invoices, watching mum and dad have a block of units in Melton, seeing grandparents put some elbow grease in with dad, like it seems like a stretched mindset meant that what your baseline was compared to what someone else's baseline was is certainly very different, because it's not like you're sort of trying to fund a 20 townhouse site or anything. It's just you have a very considered baseline that you're chasing, and I just always find that fascinating to see which is why we always ask the question about the dinner table conversation, because it forms a very, very important perspective for our audience to understand why people make the decisions that they make. And I think that that has well and truly formed the basis of why you would take, to your words, a more aggressive approach.
And can I build on that? Because what I'm interested in the thinking around risk for you, Jayson, in terms of that. So you obviously were happy to take a bit more risk in terms of the what if scenarios. How much safety net did you sort of have behind you in sort of thinking like, I want to be a bit more aggressive in my asset selection?
You mean monetary funds?
Yeah, well, it could be both, right? It can be mindset in the sense that I'm still young, and I've got a chance to recover, but also in terms of the order in which you built your portfolio. Did you have your home first and then you've released equity off the back of that? So I think those sort of things matter, right? Because if we've got a 24-year-old on the pod, I want to be aggressive too, but it's like, well, just how aggressive can you be? You've got age on your side, so that's true. But if you've got no backup or no support network around you, that could be fatal in some respects. So just in terms of looking at that first purchase and being a bit more aggressive, to your point, what was it that was sort of instrumental in giving you the confidence to take that pathway?
So when I decided to start investing, I'd actually already purchased my first PPR.
Yep.
So I guess my safety net in that regard was time. I purchased my first PPR. It was a small house in South Marine in 2012.
Yep.
I was still single at the time, so I had that. I had nothing, like no one else I was accountable for but myself.
Yep.
And
no other commitments.
Yeah,
yep.
I had the safety net of my family, my parents. If it didn't go well, I could always move back home.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so that's how that sort of started, and then once I met my wife now and partner, we just decided to. Well, our family started growing, so we had to upsize.
So you've upsized, you've moved out to Sunbury as part of that, and then of course there's some equity that you've created. When did you buy Sunbury?
So it was a block of land. It was in 2017,
yep.
And for 220,000. It was the affordability factor. We looked all over Victoria, and my parents were still living in the Doncaster area at the time, so we wanted to move out there, but just couldn't afford it.
Yeah,
this seemed like the best option that we had, and we built our now forever home.
Yep, love it.
And then once that was in, where we were in here in 2019, we'd gotten a bit more savvy in that point in time after listening to your podcast and how to structure the loans and stuff. We've had a lot of equity in our property too. Then immediately jump into another property
Great.
from there.
And you sold South Morang?
No, I still own that one.
Oh, great. Okay, so good. So your first foot in, so hence that's the first property, and then you've added to that after the Sunbury purchase as well. So you use the equity in South Morang plus obviously your wife's deposits or savings. Did she have any assets?
No, she's migrant as well. She's come over from Ireland. She didn't even intend to be here. I sort of grabbed her and kept her.
Yeah, you've kept her in the greatest country of all. Okay, that's fair enough. Hopefully she believes that.
Yeah. So property number 1 was South Morang. Property number 2, was that the other investment property, or was that Sunbury?
Sunbury.
Currently, yes. Yeah.
And then property number 3 was the next investment purchase. Okay, which you, as you said, you DIY'd those. Well, also, obviously, South Morang is an accidental investor, and you'd be amazed how many accidental investors there are that just, great that you hold on to that first property and then move up the ladder and retain that property. That's just a brilliant story. And then you've gone and bought your IP number 2. So tell us a little bit about that purchase.
So it's very similar to the one in South Morang. It's on a small block of about 370 square meters in Mill Park, but so they're not townhouses, but they're, I don't know what you'd call them, Ben. They're standalone dwellings.
Villa units, almost like a villa.
They have their own number as well, so it's not
like that could be a townhouse.
Can be a townhouse. But yes, so that was property number 2. We purchased that for $575 in the height of COVID.
Yep.
That was another
advantage of the low interest rates.
Yeah, that was another pro to you boys. Like, be fearful when others are greedy, and greedy when others. So
that's easy to say, Jayson. What tell us the conversations you and your wife are having when it's like, we know that this represents a good opportunity, but we've actually got to do this, and that was an unprecedented event too. Tell us what was the thinking at the time to pull the trigger.
It was more just opportunity. It looked right. The market was, I'd say, ripe for the picking at that point. Like, a lot of people were running away, and I could see that we'd still go to. It was before the lockdowns. We could still go to open homes, and lucky we were able to. There was no one at these open homes, and we put in an offer, and my wife wasn't too happy with the offer that we'd put in because she thought it was a bit too much. 10 grand more than what we'd actually agreed to in the car. And I said, well, like, from all the things that I've been listening to, and I think that we're in a good stead. It doesn't matter if we pay a bit extra now. We'll recoup that in less than the time it'll take to settle on this property, which took a while anyway because it was a deceased estate, and we found out later that they didn't even have probate. So,
how long did the settlement take?
It took about. We bought it, I think, in April, and it settled in October.
Yeah,
I love those stories.
Yeah, locked in the price and don't.
You lock in the price, and then all of a sudden the interest rates go down to 0.1.
It was great to see also when we had the agent coming after us saying that, your finance is not done, and it didn't end up being our issue. It was the fact that they hadn't had probate. But I found out later on that they also had other people chomping at the bit to try and get into this house.
That's great price. Look, they're great stories. So now I want to move on to, when did you decide that you needed to sort of spread the wings? Was it a borderless investor decision that sort of led you to considering buyers agents, or was it like a land tax decision from Dan the man and our great state leaders that sort of was this? What was the catalyst for you in terms of looking to potentially get some professional help on the next purchase?
I'd say it'd be a bit of both, really. Yep. Diversify our portfolio and try and chase that yield aspect of it, because our serviceability was looking quite maxed out at that point. And also the land tax would follow on, I'd say.
Yep. And in terms of the when you're making a decision and you talk about a top tier, or the buyer's agent that you ultimately went to, and we're going to talk about that experience. What is it that makes a top tier? Were they just really strong at marketing, and ultimately you got a lot of marketing collateral and material from them, or was there anything behind that?
What gave you the confidence that this company could deliver on what you needed?
Yeah, it was they marketed themselves as being well resourced and well reviewed,
multi-award winning,
and well reviewed as well on say Google reviews and everything like that. So we thought we were in safe hands, really.
Okay, so let's unfold the story a little bit. Was there any where were the early warning signs that, looking back, that sort of maybe felt like something wasn't right for you?
Yeah, so we looked at three properties, just to give you a broad overview. We looked at three properties with this company, and it was at property number one, early warning signs that, having a trade background, as I mentioned earlier, just seeing the building report that we got back from the building inspector that they recommended to use as they were buying in this area. We thought, local knowledge, they'd have good trades on hand. Some of the pictures didn't look right, and nothing was really flagged in the building report that was reflective of those pictures.
Yeah.
Can you give us a context of the age of the property, Jayson?
I think it's an early 2000 fibro cement style house in South Australia, in Mount Gambier.
Yep.
There was just a few warning signs. Like I could see some blemishes in the pictures, and I wasn't too sure if they were the actual picture had just
defects or the picture themselves. Okay.
So it wasn't too far from us. It was about 4 hours from us. So I said to my wife on the day, look, so we'd gone through. To give you context, we'd gone through the whole process with the first property. We'd put in an offer, it was accepted, and we were in the cooling off period. And on the last day of the cooling off period, after talking to other tradie mates and my cousin, who's a builder, built this house for us, he's like, "You'd be crazy not to go out there and have a look at it. You're putting all this money into it, and you need to go sight it yourself." So we rang the selling agent who had actually done the video walkthrough for us on that property, and told them, without telling the buyer's agent, that we were going to go view this property, because we didn't want to tried to get talked out of it. So we went and viewed it, and I tell you, it wasn't as it was portrayed in the pictures of the video. There was a lot of things omitted. Let's say.
Double click. What was omitted?
Mould around all the eaves in the exterior of the property. It looked like the interior of the property had been freshly painted on the ceiling, and mould was coming through, which wasn't on the building report. But also the building report stated that they won't comment on mould. And then you walk out the side door from the laundry, and you can see over the neighbour's fence, and there was a metre tall grass with a burnt out caravan in the backyard.
Yeah, that wasn't in the video?
Definitely not. And then things like the agent saying to us, "Oh, you don't buy the place for the neighbours." I go, but I'm like, "Yeah, we sure as hell rent it out for the."
Yeah.
You want to try
to make a choice, don't they? Yeah, when they look at the neighbours.
And then I actually said to my wife at the time when we were inspecting the property, I go, "This is all mould. How did the building inspector not pick up on this?"
Yeah.
And the vendor was there at the inspection. I actually bailed them up in front of the agent and said, "Do you guys have issue with mould?" And they said, "Oh yeah, only in the eaves." So I was just like, this seems like alarm bells. Like, what else are they hiding?
Yeah.
Because on paper, this property looked great, circa 5%, 5.5% gross yield.
Because that was the enticement, right? That was you. That's right there what you were chasing. And what's the entry point for the price?
The price was $405.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
So it was at the cheaper end of the scale, and like we weren't expecting awesome property. I didn't even mind if I had to do a bit of work to the property, but
Yeah.
that was a bit too much work. And talking to builders and stuff, it would have meant like a full roof replacement and things like that, which was thousands and thousands of dollars that
Yeah.
ate into the profits initially straight away. So
Sounds like a reason for selling to me.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
So So we left there. We contacted the buyer's agent and said that we weren't too impressed with the property, and he didn't realize that we'd actually gone out to see it, and was a bit shocked. And when we questioned him on it, he was like, "Oh, but the building inspection didn't say there was mould." And I said, "Well, the building inspection also noted that they wouldn't comment on mould either. So, and the vendor knows that there's mould present. So, not too happy with it." And then because this was the last day of the cooling off period too, we'd expressed to him that we wanted out, and he pressured us into wanting to negotiate on our behalf and try and get the mould, because the deal on paper worked. Get the mould rectified at the cost of the current vendor, and a bit of back and forth between us and the buyer's agent and the vendor. And in the end, the buyer's agent said that the vendor didn't want to pay for the removal of the mould. So subsequently, we terminated. The vendor wanted to mutually terminate the contract past the cooling off period.
All right. In South Australia, geez, I've got to stretch my memory, but it's no penalty to cool off as well. So that's pretty straightforward. So okay, so you've gone one property, you've had an experience. It seems like you would be on your guard at this point. So because look, as a buyer's agent, I mean, my job is to form a relationship with the client to make them feel like we are on the same side of the desk. So how did that sort of make you and your wife feel?
Yeah, definitely very much on our guard. In the subsequent properties, we chose our own building inspectors going forward, and we made that decision to choose our own building inspectors. The conveyancer, we didn't think really had much of a part to play in the actual selection of the process. They were just facilitating the transaction. That was in my eyes, and please correct me if I'm wrong. And the finance person was actually, we were actually pretty happy with him, the one that they recommended, was in the initial consultation that, to get your borrowing capacity and find out what sort of markets they're going to place you in and all that. Sorry, Bryce.
Yeah, but Jayson, there is a flag. Conveyancing, well, the legal contract is the relationship between what you're buying. I know the assets and the improvements are the physical thing, but that contract potentially does matter. So I know you just sort of said you downplayed it a little bit. I just want to just remind people in terms of that the special conditions in contracts, the inclusions, the chattels and all of those things, and the conditions of the contract do matter. And we would always advocate to get the contract reviewed, because at the end of the day, the contract is written in favour of the vendor. Okay, and the late settlement conditions can sometimes be arduous and those types of things. So I still think it's really helpful, especially when you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, that you get a pre-contract review to just know whether there's any recommendations that the lawyers / conveyancer, because remember, conveyancer isn't a legal, isn't able to practice law, but they should be still really reasonably well versed. The good ones, the really good ones, should still be well versed in terms of flagging any potential risk in the contractual obligation of the transfer of the property. So just wanted to flag that, and hopefully that's for your benefit going forward as well.
Yeah, sorry if I misspoke, but there, Ben. But the conveyancer that they did have did all that, and
good.
They were pretty good at that side of it. So sorry if I misspoken there.
No, that's right. This is one thing for interstate buyers too, Jayson, is when there is no clause in South Australian contracts that says you're entitled to a pre-settlement inspection, whereas when you come from markets where it's a standard, you can actually make that that assumption that you're going to go and do a pre-settlement inspection. And they're like, no, you're not having one. So all I would say on the conveyancing thing is you've got to know the rules. You've got to know that we do not have one uniform system across this country, which is a shame. So therefore, understanding the nuances when you want to be a borderless investor is really, really important, which is why we always advocate for having a network that's local, a network that we've vetted beforehand, and a network that actually acts in the best interest of our clients so that we can actually get that pre-contract work done. So any red flags, we don't proceed.
Jayson, can I ask a question also? When you received the video on the inspection of the property and you found out that that video was being done by the selling agent, did that trigger any concern for you in respect? Obviously, they didn't show you the neighbour's property. They didn't show you the context of the street and the streetscape and all of that. So did you like, because it's your first time, right? So did it flag something in your mind to sort of say, well, wait a minute, the selling agent works on behalf of the vendor. They're not necessarily working in my best interest. Did that raise a flag for you that first time?
Yeah, not really, Ben, because I didn't think it was the selling agent doing it.
It wasn't disclosed.
The selling agent was there present in the video, but it was someone else walking you through the dwelling. So I was under the assumption that they had a representative there doing it on that first property anyway. That was the case. It wasn't the case for the others, but yeah.
Okay.
That's an important distinguisher too, right? So if you have someone, there under no circumstances can you get a video done that you send to a client where there's any conflict of interest. Oh my gosh, it's 101.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, you said 3. We're still only at number 1 right here, aren't we? So is there any juice left to squeeze on number 1, or as a cautionary tale?
Not really. It's just that we've pretty much covered.
Gotcha. So let's pivot to number 2. Tell us about the second one that was presented to you.
So the second one we got that we had a new buyer's agent presented to us from the same company. This one was in Queensland, so it was a bit further. We couldn't actually exactly go and inspect that one.
Well, not easily.
Yeah, not easily. In Gracemere.
Yep.
And this one wasn't right from the get-go. First, the yield wasn't what we assumed that we were targeting. It was a lot lower than the previous one. The presentation of the property was quite poor, like with regards to, it just didn't seem like it was organised well. They used the excuse of having a different agency letting the property rather than the one selling it. So the walkthrough was done with a phone camera by the actual agent this time, and she'd be holding it, like pointing mainly towards the ground as she was walking through, and then they wouldn't go in some rooms because the tenants' kids were sleeping, and they didn't even do a walk around the house. And there was a couple other red flags with from the side of the comparables that they posed to us as well. Going on your point before, Bryce, we were on guard after this point, so we started to do a bit more digging after they presented a property to us. So they showed us comparables of properties that were selling around the price they recommend us buy it for, and then we'd find properties on the same street selling for $20,000 less just a month ago. So that didn't really put a good taste in our mouth on that one, and we said, well, we're not prepared to pay the price that you're asking for that one. So that was quickly squashed. And
Jayson, can I ask about the openness to move from one state to another?
With a new buyer's agent as well.
Very quickly, like when you engage them, did they give you an understanding of, these, like, did they say, here's the 4 or 5 locations that we're currently buying in, and if one pops up, we're just going to grab it on your behalf, and you endorse that strategy? Or was there more of a focus in terms of, tell us how that played out, in terms of when you decide to engage, this particular team?
Yeah, so when we decide to engage them after having the financial chat with the mortgage broker and finding out what markets we'd be playing in, they definitely said that with your budget, these are the sort of markets we're playing in that budget, and when one pops up in that sort of region,
and you are open-minded to jump from state to state because again, at the end of the day, you were restricted heavily by your borrowing capacity. That yield was essential to get their lending approved, and you had a $400,000 budget, right? So
the budget was more the 500,000.
Okay, sorry, 500,000.
Yeah,
Yep.
so more the yield play was where we were going.
Keep you in the game. Yep.
All right. So, you said we're not going to proceed with this one, and then pivoted to a third.
Yeah. So the third one was presented to us in the next month. It was around December of last year. It was in Dubbo.
Yep.
This one I actually really liked. It was a nice early 2000s brick home. Had minor renovations to it. It seemed like it was a good investment property to me. It had good bones anyway from the actual property standpoint, and the yield looked good. They, after doing our research independently of them and talking to the same buyer's agent as the second property, we came up with the number of 480 for that one, and he was going to go in and negotiate, and we found out that there was a rival bidder, and they'd beaten us to the 480 mark. So he came back to us and said, he thinks they're tapped out at 480. Would you like us to put in another $1,000 bid? And I said, look, if it'll secure us the property, $1,000 extra is nothing in the long run. Let's do it, but that's as high as we'll go. And we were successful in that. We said yes, so we agreed to our terms, the building and pest, which he said something really strange. He said that normally building and pest, and this might allude to what you were saying before, Bryce, building and pest is not really used in New South Wales because they have the 5-day cooling off period after exchange of contracts.
Yeah.
And then, so after that offer was accepted, we were waiting for the contracts to be exchanged, and I followed up with him on the Monday. That was the Friday. I followed up with him on the Monday about how we were going with the contracts. And then he told us that there were, sorry, I have to jump back a bit. At that point, after we were told it was accepted, I said to him that, should we organise a building and pest anyway? And he said, no, we'll wait till the exchange of contracts. And then on Monday, he proceeded to tell us that once we exchange contracts, there's we would be liable for 0.25% of the purchase price if at any reason we wanted to back out. And then I did some quick calculations with Ash, and I think this was the straw that broke the camel's back. Was I'm like, well, I'd rather forego $700 on a building and pest inspection prior to exchanging contracts than committing and then losing $1,200 or $1,500 in the purchase price.
Yeah, in a cooling off exercise. Yep.
Cooling off exercise. Sorry, yeah. So
wow.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back, and I said, well, these guys are either not as experienced as we thought, or it just reeked of inexperience, really.
Yeah, because in New South Wales, it's actually the hardest market to operate in this country because it is an exchange system, whereas Queensland and West Australia and Victoria have offer and acceptance that can sometimes be subject to. In New South Wales, it's once they're exchanged, so all the DD needs to be done in advance, including the building inspection, right? So for them to say, "Oh no, we'll wait for the contracts to exchange," that's just inexperience or deceit, one of the two.
Gazumping can happen.
Gazumping happens all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. All the time.
That might be what he was alluding to. He didn't want us to someone else just to swing in and go, "Oh, we're going to take this off your hands now and sell it."
But to have that conversation about, so here's the idea, right? So if we do exchange, we've got 5 days cooling off, but it's 0.25 if we do call off. So that's $1,250. If we go for the building and pest at $750, like at least you're informed. Do you know what I mean? And then it's ultimately your judgment call. Now, he just assumed that, you know, because they may have done other deals that way, where they're just sort of saying, well, we prefer to get the exchange rather than wasting your money, because we've had experiences probably in the past where we've been gazumped. But so it is a trade-off. But at the end of the day, you know the risks of doing either approach. And I think that's an essential thing when looking after clients is it's the client's money. And ultimately, to your point, that communication breakdown was your radar was already up, and that final communication breakdown in the way in which the process was handled was the final straw.
Yeah, and so we asked to speak to management, and bit of back and forth. I don't know if you want me to go into details about that one, but
well, we will. But there's one question I have, and did I just catch your wife's name, Ash? Is that right?
Yeah, it's Irish. There's Ashling is her actual name, but
Ashling.
Ling, yeah, Ashling.
Okay, Ashling, gotcha. So here's the question that some of our listeners might be asking, Jayson, and it's probably one that I need to scratch the itch on. After our experience in Queensland, that's twice bitten. Why did we go for a third swing? Talk me through that.
Yeah, I think that because we'd already committed our money to it, we just wanted to see the process right out one more time before, like, hopefully they would come to the party with something exceptional and say, all right, well, we haven't delivered what the clients wanted in the first two. Let's see if we can really nail it on this one. Like, being, as I said, a top tier, what I would consider a top tier or a highly regarded firm in the industry, I think they'd have a lot to lose in their reputation and not performing well. So they'd want to get it right at some point.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's probably fair to say, Ben, it wasn't us. So just so that we can put that.
Yeah, no, it wasn't us.
Definitely wasn't you guys.
That's all right. But I look, with Bryce, as a leader of our buyers agency team and so forth, we've transacted on over 4,000 properties. But like at the end of the day, I can confidently say that 100% of the clients that we've worked with haven't been 100% happy with our service. So, it's just the law of big numbers that says you're going to have a small portion of those that might be happy. And I think that's really important for our community to understand. It is also important to say, you go in this with your best endeavours, but if you do cut corners, when, this is a big investment for Jayson and for anyone else who's using a buyer's agent, we want the industry to get better. We want the professionalism to keep lifting. And we think, which is what we've said, in our Spruker episode, is that we don't accept that a selling agent should be able to walk around the property on behalf of you as the buyer. If you can't, you need some independence in that. And in, the way in which we work, we either have our buyer's agents do it, or we have one of our support people go off and do that work for us if we're buying interstate. So I think that's really important. And, let's round out the story, Jayson. Did you get your money back?
Yeah. So after the third property, we were still under we had our contract accepted, and we'd asked, because we had a chat, and it had all these people in the company that we'd never even talked to before. And we'd asked that we'd wanted to speak to a person from management, and we were very displeased with the service we've been offered, and we'd like to get out of our contract. So we had their head of acquisitions call us the next day, and we were discussing with him, and he was actually saying to us, with regards to that first property that I alluded to in Mount Gambier, that they actually saved us $10,000, and said that, well, you would have forfeited your deposit had we not had another client take that property from you.
Are you serious?
Yeah. So that just made us sick at the end of it.
It's like blowing sand in your eyes after you've got a blood nose.
Yeah. Yeah, so we were very disappointed in that, and we proceeded to tell him, well, no, we were told that we could get out in the building and pest clause anyway, as well as the fact that it was a mutual termination, because the vendor was not willing to rectify or remedy the mould that was present.
So there's a massive. Can I just double click on that point, because this is really important? How that building and pest report is written, in terms of conditions, this is the point. So many people have been caught on this, whereby they say, look, I've got a building and pest clause in the contract, so if I'm not happy with it, I can kill the contract. Depending on how that building and pest inspection clause is written, what you'll find is the solicitor on the other party will go, no, that's not what we agreed to. We just need to rectify that build. So hence that's what he was saying to you. Now, did they explain that to you? Like, no, because this is the problem, though. The wording in that building and pest needs to be really clear that it gives us the right to terminate the contract. Right? Yeah. And if it doesn't do that, then he is right to say that if it wasn't the fact now, but that doesn't help you in any way. But again, it's another classic case of clauses in contracts matter, and they matter a lot when the shit hits the fan, right? And this was a classic case of, no, we're gonna force them to buy it. And we have seen people who have been forced to buy because they couldn't get out of the contract because of the wording in their building and pest. And so I think that's a good message for our community in terms of making sure you've got really thorough clauses in your contract.
And we've structured up clauses that allow us to have the best chance for us to have a clause that's worded in the buyer's favour. Now, I don't want anyone to take this away, Ben, that it's a perfect science, because to be honest, sometimes we present an offer with a clause that's fully loaded for the buyer, and the vendor says, no, I won't sign that. So, but the thing is, it's a collaboration, and it's a conversation. This is what the goal of the buyer's agent should be. I'll just talk to the audience here. The goal of the buyer's agent, I said it earlier, is to make the client feel that you're on the same side of the desk. So when we present an offer with an annexure that says, hey, look, here's our building and pest condition, or here's our finance condition, or whatever our condition is, it's structured in a way from our side of the fence that gives the best protection to the buyer. But in some cases, we can't get it over the line, right? So, but then we have a conversation with the client just to say, hey, listen, this is the situation we're in. We're in competing interests. We won't get it over the line. This is what we'll do in consultation. And we massage it through as long as everyone's informed along the way, which is the really important part. But it sounds like, Jayson, that from what I'm picking up from you, it didn't feel like on many occasions you were on the same side of the desk.
No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Mm. And the final piece of that, they then asked you to potentially sign a non-disclosure agreement. Now, they are, again, full disclosure. One of the things that, if you're refunding clients, you want to potentially make sure that this is the final claim and that there's no future claim for loss or damages. So it is a very common practice in sort of when there's reasonable amounts of money involved. But obviously the non-disparagement, which is also, the reputation risk. We haven't mentioned any names here today, and we'll do that because, again, we're not perfect either in terms of that. But I mentioned in the spruikering episode that they were almost encouraged or incentivized to get a refund of their, lifetime membership or whatever if they basically, put down a disparaging review, and then ultimately, so I want people to have a view to be able to share what they want, but you are trying to get an agreement in place that settles both parties' needs. And obviously it's reputational risk that they were potentially looking at as part of that story.
Yeah. Yeah. So there was a after the initial call with him, and he had agreed that they would refund our retainer. There was a subsequent call about 10 minutes later asking me what email to send the paperwork for us to sign, and we went through a conversation about what that paperwork looked like and if it did include a non-disclosure agreement. And he said yes, and I said, well, me and my wife aren't happy to sign a non-disclosure agreement. And we went away from that conversation, and I asked him whether us not signing the non-disclosure agreement was subject to us getting our retainer back. And he said he couldn't answer it at that time. So that was where that conversation left. And then 10 minutes later, I received a call from the CEO of the company assuring me that we would get our retainer back and refund us for all subsequent costs that we'd incurred on all three of the properties during our dealings with this buyer's agent.
Okay.
There was also other options as well. Like he offered to take us on as clients himself and offer to do the research and present it to us himself. But we felt we were too burnt at that point in time, so we didn't want to proceed. So
Now, I think that's a reasonable gesture. Like in terms of it's gone to the founding, CEO of the company, and they're trying to get a resolution for you. There may have been some rules and standards through the different layers of management that that was their authorities, and then ultimately he's come in and said, no non-disclosures, everything's good. I will come in and step in and personally look after you. So I can see that being something of a gesture of goodwill. But to your point, the damage in the relationship and the trust had gone, and so that's ultimately where it ended. But again, another reminder that like in any of these sorts of arrangements, they're contractual arrangements. There's a customer on one end and a service provider on the other. They don't always go perfectly, but there are some red flags in your story here today, Jayson, that are worth telling to people, because, again, it's a significant investment that you're making and you're looking for a superior result compared to what you could have done personally.
yes, yeah.
And when you're investing in property, there's 4 components. There's growth and yield, and in this conversation, you're obviously chasing growth. We'll come back to what their growth representations were, but growth and yield, they're the obvious twins that you're after. But there's also making sure you're buying in a location that has got a acceptable vacancy rate. And the 4th component is quality of the tenant. And I think that I think that 4th one is something that I really want to labour on here, Ben, because for anyone who's listening to this, it's very sexy to buy properties. It's very sexy to buy properties interstate. It's very sexy to buy them in locations that offer up yield. But we've got to remember we're not buying a financial instrument like you are when you're buying shares or anything that's sort of a financial instrument traded. You're actually buying a tangible asset that when all's said and done, when everyone walks away, it's just you and the property manager left. Right? It's just you and the property manager left. And you need to be able to attract a tenant that is at a quality that is on the spectrum that you're prepared to tolerate. Now, some people who are experienced are happy to take the risk of the quality of tenant to another level to chase certain yields or certain opportunities or certain value adds. But for other people, Ben, particularly if they're new to the game, where their risk tolerance is for the quality of tenant on that spectrum is probably much lower. So the reason I say that is because we see a property in Mount Gambier that was riddled with mould that someone was trying to offload. That the buyer's agent at the time said, "Oh, well, it suits all of our criteria on paper, but it doesn't suit the walkaway test. When all's said and done, everyone walks away, and I'm still left with the property, and I've got to try and find a tenant for this property. Like, tenants don't love living in houses with mould. I promise you, it's a health risk. But on paper, when you plug the value and the yield and you put it into a spreadsheet, if you can hold it long enough, it looks amazing. But we still got to honour the actual viability of holding these assets long term. I think that's often forgotten in some of the marketing sizzle. I think it's often forgotten in some of the, Ben, we are pioneers of the borderless investing philosophy. But these are the things that people need to be aware of. And then, not to mention that Jayson's been involved in 3 jurisdictions. South Australia, contractual jurisdiction that's different to Queensland jurisdiction, which is different to New South Wales jurisdiction. So we're going to be able to pivot and flex and be ready to jump on it. So I think...
Well, and just to your point there, Bryce, Allianz Australia recently released, and I'll talk about this in What's Making Property News in more detail, but they released the areas where the majority of claims occur, in terms of landlord claims against tenants. And if you have a look at the suburb profiles, it does represent, unfortunately, a lower socio-economic area in those profiles. Now, when you think about that and study that for just a moment, you do understand that, in some cases, these people living in these areas may have challenges around income, debts, and job security, because they're there for a reason in some respects, right? And so if they're living paycheck to paycheck, the biggest claim is going to be on unpaid rent. then you're potentially also going to have damages. So if you're also in some of these areas, the social fabric cohesion in the relationship, the stresses associated with those money pressures can potentially lead to domestic violence, property damage, those types of things as well. And so it's just a reminder to people that when you are buying in entry-level markets, that they're some of the considerations, because the trade-off is good. To Jason's point, the income's going to be a bit higher and there's a bit more risk. And that's all we're trying. And we still buy in these areas for our own clients? So I don't think that this is not, if a client brief is that we've got to get into those areas, we will do that. But what we want to be clear on is two things: the communication during the process, but also expectations around the potential. If it's an older property because you're chasing land to asset ratio, you're going to have maintenance. And potentially in some cases, you may not get the best tenant or the picture of the tenant that you want who wants to care for your property. You may not get that type of tenant where it is essentially just shelter, and that's what they're using it for. And they have no means to want to caretake the property. They just want to use it. So those are the types of things that you've got to be considerate towards when you're going into those types of markets.
Jayson, so we've now presented a scenario that wasn't amazing for you, and it's been a cautionary tale for our audience. But the story does have a happy ending, which is nice. So let's pivot to that. You actually did end up buying a property interstate. So what were the lessons that you learned, and how did you rebuild your confidence so that you could actually keep investing and go interstate?
Well, I think being able to see the property was a big factor for us. So we didn't jump too far. We pivoted to Albury, just on the other side of the border.
Side of the border. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
It's still interstate, still counts.
Yeah, that's all right.
It does.
Different land tax.
By a bridge.
Yes. Yeah. So we just said to ourselves, well, we're pretty confident in everything that we've seen, and that we're doing a pretty good job on our own. Look out for what yield we're sort of chasing and the type of property we're looking for. So we ended up buying a townhouse, one of two, in Lavington in Albury, in the Albury region. We settle on that next week.
Beautiful.
So good. Nice one. Well, so Jayson,
keep us updated on how that one plays out.
Yeah, hopefully it's gone pretty well so far. So
great.
Yeah.
Nice. And so tell us then what's the reflection? So a friend of yours, someone comes up to you at work, and they seek counsel from you. I want to buy interstate. What's the message that you're going to say to them when they say, "Hey, look, we're thinking of hiring a buyer's agent"? What are you asking them to look out for?
Mainly more just don't be afraid to ask questions and stand up for things that you have that gut feel that you don't think is right. If it smells or it doesn't feel right, just call the buyer's agent out on it. It's your money at the end of the day. You're hiring them to provide you a service. They should be able to give you an answer to your problem.
Yeah.
I think it is sage advice, Jayson, and you being able to share that story. Communication is everything. You should have a policy. There's no such thing as a silly question. Right? If you've got an advisor, not just a buyer's agent, but financial advisor, accountant, if someone comes to you and they're setting up for a meeting and they say, "Hey, I've got a couple of rules, and one of those rules is there's no such thing as a silly question," that's a great rule to start with, because it basically means it shares permission to ask questions and have that analysis done and then get to the bottom of it, because that builds trust. And ultimately through that trust process, you get greater outcomes. And in your case, that trust eroded over time to a point where at the end of the day, you decided to do it yourself. But sharing this story is timely. It's a great reminder. We want to get better at buyer's agents more generally across our industry, as well as professional advisors, property investment advisors, the whole thing. So we can all learn from this experience. And I'm sure that when Bryce and I talk to our team, we'll be sharing some of these messages that we get from you. And of course, the feedback we get from our delighted customers that we work, but also those ones who didn't necessarily have the best of experiences, because we're all learning in terms of, being better in terms of offering these types of services.
Hey, Jayson, mate, I think you've been really brave. Thank you for accepting the call. Thank you for reaching out to me on LinkedIn and sharing your story. And we had a conversation where I said, what do you reckon? And you were like, ooh, I was happy to share the story. I wasn't sure about going on the podcast, and here you are.
It wasn't as daunting as I initially thought.
Yeah, well, I said that to you, didn't I? I said, look, we'll take great care to make sure that you're comfortable and relaxed, like we do with anyone who comes onto this podcast. But mate, I just think that at the end of the day, you're doing a service to our community, right? Because the whole idea of this podcast is for people to make informed decisions. And to Ben's point, we have a buyer's agency business in our business, and we certainly don't pretend that we are perfect. But what I can say is we put a lot of energy and time into checklists and making sure that we don't cut corners. And so therefore, can we guarantee everything's perfect? No, we can't. But can we guarantee that we'll follow a process and make sure that we don't cut corners? Well, that's where we feel like we can mitigate. But Ben, we are the old dinosaurs. We are slow and boring.
Yeah.
And,
we're the old generation, Bryce. We're not the young generation coming through, that's for sure.
But all we care about is people get to their goal on time, right? And that's important. Yeah. They get to their goal, and they get to their goal on time. So as we sort of head for home, Jayson, what is your North Star? What is it that you're investing for? What's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow? What are you chasing?
It's funny that you mentioned pot of gold. My wife's Irish.
No, four-leaf clover.
Sorry,
a four-leaf clover.
No, all my wife's family's overseas, so just a bit more travel in retirement and the ability to live under our own steam and not having to worry about paycheck to paycheck, and be able to provide our kids with all the ability to pursue goals that they want to pursue without fear of
financial springboard.
Yeah,
yep.
But obviously not just a handout to them, but also more like a security blanket for them to be able to not be afraid to fail.
Yeah,
great.
And then also enjoy the fruits of our labour. Really,
yeah. Well done. Well said.
I think you will, mate. Your baseline is success because you've seen it with your parents. Your baseline is you're not burning fuel trying to get your mindset right. You've got a really expansive base to go from, which is really, really cool. So, mate, thank you again. I think that's a story that will help a lot of people. I'll probably put the call out, Ben, to anyone else who might have an experience that's similar to Jayson that we can all learn from.
We like to fix bad haircuts, don't we, Bryce?
Oh, nice little segue to the book that's coming up, Ben. But if you've got a story to share, reach out to me on LinkedIn, reach out to Ben on LinkedIn. We'd love to certainly hear from you. But, mate, on behalf of everyone here at Property Couch, Jayson, thanks for being so brave and sharing your story.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Jayson.
Pleasure's all ours. There you go, Ben. It's kind of nice to not just have you and me sort of getting up here, sort of talking about that. The reason I was so excited about having Jayson on is it just meant that someone who is part of our community, who also had some aspiration and some ideas around how they wanted to accelerate their portfolio, as they looked under the veil on some of the tactics and some of the strategies that were being employed, it didn't serve them as well as it should have. And I think hopefully it's a cautionary tale for some people that are listening to this pod.
Yeah, I think clearly through the consumer lens and through the customer lens, we obviously get to see that on a day-to-day basis through the service work that we do. But that was a really honest assessment in terms of the pros and cons and what went right and what didn't go right. And it reinforced some of our warning signals and amber signals, red and amber signals when it comes to the experience you have in buying property. There's no guarantees. Risk is involved. And so you want to be able to maintain a high level of trust and confidence in the professional service people you engage. And that was a good story that everyone can build their knowledge and fill in some knowledge gaps that they might have had as part of that story.
Hey, fun fact out of that conversation, Ben, that Jayson had a property in Mill Park, and then he talked about
Yep.
South Morang. I met my father-in-law in a cafe in Mill Park before I met my wife, and then he invited me to Andrea's house for dinner.
Yeah.
Because Andrea was living in Japan, right? So I'd never met her, but I was doing business with Andrea's dad. And so Mill Park Cafe invites me over to South Morang to the family home, and my wife was just a photo up on the wall, and I'm like, oh, I've got to meet that woman one day. And then here we are, married some almost 20 years later.
What do they call it? A serendipitous moment or sliding door moment or whatever? Yeah, that's a nice one.
I hear, Jayson, I know exactly where you're talking about with those suburbs. But thanks for being so brave. I rang him and I said, do you want to come on? And he went, yes. And then I said, the conversation, Ben, that I had was, okay, let's do this tomorrow. And you know, sometimes when people go, oh, yeah, I'll do it in a couple of weeks, or maybe we'll do it next month, or let's revisit this in a couple of months or whatever. I'm like, less than 24 hours, let's have this conversation. And good on him. He embraced it.
He did a great job.
Was happy to come on. So, Jayson, we're very, very grateful for that. Hey, my life by design hack today, Ben, is something I picked up from Uncle Warren, Warren Buffett. And he goes, if you want to teach your kids about taxes, the best way to do that is just before you give them their ice cream with, ice cream cone with the ice cream, eat 30% of it. and then hand it over to them. And they'll go, what happened? We go, well, there's a life lesson, buddy. When you think you're going to get the whole ice cream and 30% of it's gone, there's your first lesson on taxation. I thought it was a nice little light-hearted way.
It is a light-hearted. And obviously, Warren's in the news. Big news this week, stepping down as the chairman of Berkshire Hathaway and passing the baton on. And obviously, we've seen the share price reflect the genius that is Warren.
Yes.
But obviously, I think was he 93, 94 or whatever. He's still going to potentially be in the background. He's not really going anywhere. But there are obligations as chair of an organisation of that size.
Yeah.
That ultimately,
you're allowed to short sell your own stock, Ben, when you step down.
What's that?
You're allowed to short sell your own stock when you step down like that. I would have thought that might have been insider trading. So
no, you didn't do it.
Very good. Hey, Ben, what's making property news?
Yeah, I thought, I mentioned this obviously in our chat with Jayson around where you're buying and the pros and cons of buying in those areas. There's a lot of debate around this sort of topic. There's buyers, agents and investment advisors who don't think that, there's any real difference between the types of tenants that you get in different properties. That is not our view. And now we're backing it up with data. So recently reported in the News Corp papers and also on realestate.com.au is the story of the most common landlord insurance claims were for storm, burst pipes, malicious damage and unpaid rent. And that's been reported through Allianz Australia and their spokesperson, which was Matt Anderson. And so we then said, this is fascinating because we've always been wanting to get our hands on this data to see what it also means in terms of, is there any themes here in terms of the different markets? So I'm going to read out the markets in the different states and then we'll talk to this story. So the top 10 areas of landlords in Victoria: Hoppers Crossing, Werribee, Craigieburn, Cranbourne, Melton, Narre Warren, Melton South, Wyndham Vale, Berwick, Frankston. Now, when you think about the socio-demographic in those areas, it is clear that socio-demographic is in the lower quartile. Let's go now to New South Wales: Liverpool, Mount Druitt, Riverstone, Kellyville, Camperdown, Wyong, The Entrance, Dubbo, Tamworth, Maitland, also in that sort of story. That is, think about those areas and the socio-demographics. Let's go to South Australia: Elizabeth North, Salisbury, Smithfield, Elizabeth, and Park Home as one of those areas. Now, they only showed us the 5. 4 of those suburbs located in Adelaide's northeast, which is the lower socio-demographic in that area. Queensland. Inside Queensland, they broke it up a bit, obviously, because it's got big population centres. On the Gold Coast, you got, is it Pimpama, Toowoomba, Ipswich, suburbs of Goodna, which is also not far behind, so those areas. Then you've got rounding out the top 5. You had Hope Island on the Gold Coast, which is an interesting one.
That is an interesting one.
Well, I think that outlier is in terms of what we're talking about, storm damage or burst pipes. When you fix a property on Hope Island, it's in the hundreds of thousands. Then you've got Logan suburb in Beenleigh, and then you've got Gympie, and then you've got Nerang, Ipswich, Gladstone, and Redbank. And so the majority of the claims were for less than $2,000, whilst the next most common bracket was the $2,000 to $5,000, and then $5,000 to $10,000. Cyclone claims rated in the top 5 most common claims in Queensland. Brisbane claims are often for loss of rent, with suburbs more affordable pricing tending to attract more claims. Now, I was interviewed about this particular story, and that went to the marketplace recently, and I did say, and I've always said this, as unfortunately in some of those lower socio-demographic areas, there are people who are struggling financially, who are potentially operating paycheck to paycheck. That has a flow-on effect in regards to money is pressure on the household, and you can start to see households break down, relationship breakdowns, those types of things happening. And in some cases, care for the property or resentment for people who own versus not own, those things do play out in terms of human behaviours, and that's potentially where we see unpaid rent and potentially malicious damage on those particular properties where they don't care. They detach themselves from society. And so you've just got to be aware, people, that when you are buying in to these entry-level locations, and we buy for some of our clients in these areas as well, so it's not saying don't buy in them, because the capital growth in these areas, as the government has restricted borrowing power through 3% buffer rates, has pushed a lot of demand into these areas, and they're performing quite well, including some of these regional towns as part of that story. But you are seeing this particular risk. So just factor in that at some point in time, if you're going to own the properties for decades, you may have some challenging tenants as part of that. So it reminds us of the quality of the tenant that we get and the responsibility of having a great property manager who is vetting that client base and that tenant base really strongly to find you a great tenant. And when you get a great tenant, you make sure you look after them by repairing the property and keeping it in safe and quiet enjoyment of their time in that property. And then hopefully you won't have the challenges that others experience.
Well said, Ben. We're not saying that you don't invest in some of those suburbs. What we're saying is if you are investing in those suburbs without landlord protection insurance, you're probably
we have invested in some of those areas, and we will continue to invest in some of those areas as well. So that just gives you the context in terms of repairs, maintenance on the older homes. That's natural in terms of these areas, and on top of that is basically the tenant that is also potentially going to be attracted in these lower socio-demographic areas.
Very good. Thank you. Now, if anyone's made it to the end, Ben, Stiggy has let me know that I got the book wrong. It's thepropertycouch.com.au/playbook-waitlist. So now I've probably given her a bunch of work to go and capture that other one that I said book-waitlist. So I might be in trouble there, but what's changed after 10 years? But mate, it's always great to have a conversation with you. And again, Jayson, thank you for joining us on the Property Couch to share your story, and hopefully that will serve as a cautionary tale to a lot of people who are listening to this podcast. And if you think it has, why don't you screenshot it and send it to someone you know who is thinking of investing in property, someone you know who is a property investor who might be likely to get another one. Why don't you screenshot them this episode, and hopefully they can listen and check that out too, Ben. But mate, until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it by going to MyKnowledge.
Exactly. Or Act 50 on it. See you next week, folks.